Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. We have the latest on the fate of Samsung Group's heir apparent Lee Jae-yong and the so-called the trial of the century for the financial world. Consumer confidence here in Korea slipped in August from the month before on the back of recent measures by the government to curb speculation in the housing market. These stories and more coming right up. The trial of the century has come to an end. Samsung Group heir apparent Lee Jae-yong has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for crimes linked to a massive political scandal that led to the impeachment of former President Park Geun-hye. For more, we go straight to our Lee Ji-won, who's standing by at the Seoul Central District Court. So Ji-won, can you tell us more about the court's ruling today?
Ji-yoon, like you said, after an hour-long sentencing hearing, the court handed down a 5 years prison term for Lee. The court acknowledged a number of illegal activities by Samsung and Lee, which include providing over $6 million to the daughter of Choi Soon-sil, former President Park Geun-hye's longtime confidant. The court also said Samsung illegally transferred its assets to provide funding for Choi's firms abroad and had plans to give out more. With a number of allegations against Lee being upheld, the court also found him guilty of perjury for denying the charges at a parliamentary hearing earlier in the year. But the court said there is not enough evidence to prove that Lee solicited favors from former President Park when they met face-to-face in 2015. While the verdict has been much reduced compared to the 12 years prosecutors had recommended earlier in the month, Lee is likely to file an appeal as Lee's lawyers claim he was not involved in the business group's day-to-day decisions and that the payments were signed off without his knowledge.
Now, you did mention a number of charges that Lee faces, but could you tell us more about it?
Sure, Ji-yoon. The Samsung heir faces a total of 5 charges, which are bribery, perjury, illegal transfer of assets, concealing criminal profits, and embezzlement. He was accused of providing and promising a total of some $38 million to foundations controlled by Choi Soon-sil. The prosecution claims that in return, he secured government support for the merger of 2 Samsung affiliates, which paved the way for his succession as Samsung's next leader from his bedridden father, Lee Geon-hye. This has been Lee Ji-won for Business Daily.
Korea's consumer sentiment index ticked down in August after 7 months of consecutive gains. Now, the mood was affected by the uptick in tensions on the Korean peninsula, sparked by the recent exchange of threats between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Our Kim Hae-sung reports.
Korea's consumer sentiment fell slightly in August from the previous month. According to the Bank of Korea, the composite consumer sentiment index recorded 109.9 in August, down 1.3 points from a month earlier. It remains above the 100-point level, meaning optimists outnumber pessimists, but it's the first decline after 7 straight months of growth this year. The Bank of Korea attributed the decline to the government's recent measures to cool the overheated housing market. As the survey was conducted between August 11th and 18th, it was also affected by the heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula sparked by the war of words between Washington and Pyongyang. Most sub-indices for August were also down, including household perceptions of current and future economic conditions, which came to 93 and 104 respectively, falling 3 points and 5 points from the previous month. Kim Hae-sung, Business Daily.
President Moon continued to receive policy briefings from various government ministries on Friday. The Finance Ministry explained how the government would manage and spend public funds to implement its key policy initiatives. It also introduced ways to encourage innovation and foster new industries. Our Lee Jung-hyun tells us more.
The Finance Ministry on Friday briefed President Moon Jae-in on how the country's balance sheets will be managed to support the government's policy agenda on inclusive, people-centered growth. The ministry said it was committed to securing enough public funds through reforms in government expenditure this year that would save roughly $9.7 billion. Also, the ministry expects to raise some $20.8 billion through its tax revision plan submitted to Parliament earlier this month. It further explained that tax reform is aimed at supporting job creation and fair income redistribution by raising taxes on high-income earners and large corporate entities. Moreover, the government hopes to strengthen transparency and public trust in the fiscal system by promoting participation in the budgeting process. Another core focus of the Finance Ministry's report was on boosting GDP growth to above 3% through innovation. To create a friendly environment for new technologies and business ventures, the ministry aims to upgrade key IT infrastructure such as cloud computing and smart manufacturing networks. It also plans to launch initiatives to promote new industries and create an ecosystem where SMEs and big firms can coexist and thrive together. Additionally, a network of creative cities and 70 creative labs would support innovative ventures and startups and also work with universities and corporations. The ministry also stressed the need to loosen regulations to promote fluid exchange and collaboration between people, data, and spaces. Lee Jung-yeon, Business Daily.
And moving on to markets, to give us a wrap-up of this week's stock market action, we have our markets contributor, Lee Ji-hye, joining us on the line. Hello, Ji-hye.
Hello, Jiyoon.
So tell us how local stocks performed on the last trading day of the week.
Sure. Tensions ran high all day amid the looming verdict for Samsung heir Lee Jae-yong, which was delivered this afternoon, and they were clearly reflected in the Korean market. The benchmark Kospi rose 0.11% to close at 2,378.51, and the tech-heavy Kosdaq rose 0.4% to close at 650.27 this afternoon. Stock traded mixed across the board, with market bellwether Samsung Electronics rising 0.59%. Falling 0.59% rather, but Hyundai Motors rising 0.7%. Carmaker Kia Motors climbed 1.01%. SK Hynix climbed 0.29%, and leading cosmetics company Amore Pacific shed 2.2%.
Also, how did Asian markets do overall this week?
Well, Jiyoon, caution was definitely up in the air. Asian stocks were also mixed, especially with investors waiting for comments from major central bankers attending the Jackson Hole meeting. Equities rose in Hong Kong and Shanghai, while in Japan, automakers lifted the index as the yen was headed for its worst weekly loss in almost 2 months. The Bank of Japan said that producer prices were up 0.6% on year in July. This is way lower than expectations for 0.8% and the revised 0.7% gain in June. Elsewhere in Asia, the currencies in New Zealand, Indonesia, and Taiwan traded higher, while Singapore and Malaysia were lower.
Back on local markets, what are analysts saying about the local bourse for next week?
Well, analysts in Seoul are predicting that the Kospi will trade somewhere the range between 2,350 and 2,400 next week. They're expecting some technical rebound, but also are saying that volatility will be persisting without showing a clear pattern in any one direction. Many are also saying that this week's sluggish performance could be grounds for a rising trend in the upcoming week, but warn that risk management may be crucial, especially due to the weakness in commodity-linked currencies. As previously mentioned, the Jackson Hole policy meeting, political uncertainties in the United States are expected to have a major bearing on the local bourse here. Tensions between Washington and Pyongyang also may continue with the ongoing joint U.S. ROK military drills taking place until the end of this month. This has been Lee Ji-hye for Business Daily.
A public survey is now underway to decide the fate of 2 partially constructed nuclear reactors in the southeastern city of Ulsan. On Thursday, the government selected a consortium led by Hankuk Research to conduct an 18-day survey on whether construction should resume or be scrapped permanently. Around 20,000 citizens will be polled, and 500 of the respondents will be selected as part of a jury that will debate the issue with a final recommendation due on October 20th. Construction of the Shinggori 5 and 6 reactors was halted in late June, with President Moon Jae-in calling for the end of Korea's dependence on nuclear energy. Another food scare is brewing here in Korea, and this time over processed meat products imported from Europe. Health authorities here say they are tightening inspections on pork products from Europe amid concerns they could cause a nasty strain of hepatitis. Our Won Jung-hwan tells us more.
Fears loom over the new strain of hepatitis E linked to ham and sausages in Europe, prompting the Korean government to set up its food inspections. This, as the UK researchers from Public Health England announced the result of an investigation of the shopping habits of people infected with the hepatitis E virus, which later pointed to ham and sausages that they had consumed from a leading British supermarket chain. A spokesperson for the UK Food Safety Authority said the risk of infection from properly cooked meat is low and encouraged consumers to ensure their pork products are thoroughly cooked. Following such revelations, Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety says it will boost inspections on all non-heated processed meat that contains pork from Europe. Health authorities are telling Korean consumers that they will collect and inspect all such ham and sausages already out in the market and have temporarily suspended distribution and sales of products already imported. So far, Korea has already bought 12 tons of German sausages this year, some 3% of the country's total imported processed meat from Europe, a reason why the authority are asking for highlighted awareness from the consumers. Local authorities are targeting processed ham products with links to pig farms in France, the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark. The hepatitis virus can cause nasty flu-like illnesses. New figures from Public Health England show a surge in serious illnesses over the past several years. Won Jung-hwan, Business Daily.
And time now for a look at some important global business stories from the week with our Eunice Kim joining us in the studio today. Hello, Eunice.
Hello.
All right, so all eyes are in Jackson Hole, Wyoming in the U.S., where the world's central bankers and top economists have gathered for an annual policy symposium.
That's right. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's a 3-day excursion on the mountains of Wyoming. Now, Fed Chair Janet Yellen and ECB President Mario Draghi are set to make their speeches on this Friday local time. And while the Fed is on track to begin reducing its $4.5 trillion in bond holdings this fall, many will be watching what kind of signals we'll be getting from ECB's President Mario Draghi. Specifically, any hints on how the European Central Bank will start pulling back on its own bond purchase program. This comes as the Eurozone economy, as well as the global economy at large, is on a growth momentum, 10 years after the start of the global financial crisis. Now, in July, the IMF had projected that the global economy would expand by 3.5% this year and 3.6% next year. And as you can see there, OECD data showing that growth will be shared among both advanced and developing economies. It said all 45 countries it tracks are set to grow this year, the first time since 2007. Now, this includes economies like Greece, with a projected 1% growth, as well as Brazil, forecast to expand by 0.3% this year and 2% in the year following, as commodity prices stabilize and investment also picks up. But amid this overall expansionary momentum, central bank's 2% growth target remains elusive. One of the topics sure to dominate conversations on monetary policy at Jackson Hole this week. Mario Draghi has his eyes on the strength of the euro currency amid low inflation, likely to promise a slow and deliberate unwinding of QE, so to avoid overheating the economy.
Now, meanwhile, on the fiscal front in the U.S., a roadblock has been thrown up by U.S. President Donald Trump.
That's right. And this latest rhetoric from the U.S. president really could have some real implications if followed through. Now, in a campaign-like rally in Phoenix, Arizona this week, President Trump hit on a flurry of topics that included NAFTA, so-called clean coal, immigration, and this.
Build that wall. Now, the obstructionist Democrats would like us not to do it, but believe me, if we have to close down our government, we're building that wall.
That's right. That wall refers to, of course, the one Trump campaigned on along the U.S.-Mexico border, and he's essentially threatened to close down Washington if lawmakers don't allocate a budget for its construction in its spending bill. Mexico, of course, has said it doesn't want anything to do with it. Market reaction to this outburst swift. Rates on U.S. short-term Treasury bills began to soar as safe haven Japanese yen strengthened to the 109 level. Wall Street also ended down on Wednesday as investors continue to remain in wait-and-see mode. Now, the backstory on this, U.S. lawmakers will have less than a month when they return from summer break on September 5th to raise the debt ceiling in order to keep the government funded. This means spending measures need to be approved and passed by September 30th. And the U.S. president is now threatening to make that task even more difficult than it already is by insisting a budget for the wall absolutely needs to be included.
And what would happen if the debt ceiling is not raised in time?
That's a great question. And June, the worst case scenario would be a government shutdown. Now, Washington would basically run out of money and be forced to suspend payments for its financial obligations, which would include government bonds. And the last such shutdown was back in 2013 when some 800,000 federal staff had to be put on indefinite furlough. Now, global credit ratings agency Fitch has already issued a warning saying if U.S. officials fail to raise the debt ceiling in a timely manner, it would prompt a review of its U.S. sovereign rating with, quote, potentially negative implications. America's rating currently sits at the highest, AAA, and a potential downgrade would not sit well with investors. This as Mr. Trump is still locking horns with his own party leadership, and his disapproval rating, as measured by Gallup, now approaching 60%. And before I go, a bit of good news. Well, good news for one 53-year-old mother and healthcare worker from Massachusetts whose Powerball drawing proved to be lotto lucky. Mavis Wanzik held a brief press conference after being named the winner of the, get this, $758.7 million Powerball drawing after correctly matching 6 numbers drawn on Wednesday night. That is the biggest jackpot for a single ticket holder in the contest's history. And here's what she said she'd do with her name now on that check.
The first thing I want to do is I just want to sit back and relax. And I had a pipe dream, and my pipe dream has finally come true. I wanted to retire in 12, and it came early.
What do you do for work?
I work currently at Mercy Medical Center, and I was there for 32 years, and I was a unit extender patient care type of thing.
So I work. Still there, or are you?
I've called. I haven't told them I will not be coming back.
And June, when reporters asked how she'd be celebrating that night, she simply said, "I'm going to go hide in bed."
Well, I'm sure it's going to take her some time for this to really hit her, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's a lot of money to burn through.
All right. Thank you so much for that today.
You bet.
Korea's manufacturing activity has seen a sharp downturn in recent years amid a continuous decline in new business creations. According to a report from the Hyundai Research Institute, 18.1% of all manufacturing firms between 2006 to 2010 were newly created companies. However, between 2011 and 2015, the average rate fell to 14.9%. On the brighter side, the rate of business closures over the same 2 periods fell from 11.7% to 10.1% annually. Unfortunately, it's proving to be as hard as ever for these companies to break through and leave a larger footprint on the global market. Since the year 2000, Korea has added only 2 additional companies to the Forbes Global 2000 list, compared to 22 for the U.S. and 11 for Japan. On Thursday, Korean tech giant LG Electronics broke ground on its new home appliance factory in the U.S. state of Tennessee. The company held an event to commemorate what will be its first U.S.-based factory, costing some $250 million. The 77,000 square meter facility should be completed by early 2019 and is expected to add 600 full-time jobs to the region. Tennessee was chosen for its excellent business climate, quality workforce, and optimal location for distribution. LG also has plans to build a new North American headquarters in New Jersey at a cost of $300 million and scheduled for completion by 2019. The timeline for Korea's lunar exploration program has been extended by 2 years to 2020. Now, the move is hoped to give scientists some much-needed breathing room as they were racing against the clock to put a lunar orbiter into space. The researchers are naturally over the moon, so to speak, but say the deadline is still very tight. Our Elliot Kim has more.
Korean scientists have been given more time to work on the country's lunar exploration program. The deadline for the first phase goal of developing and launching a prototype lunar orbiter weighing 550 kilograms in cooperation with NASA has been extended by 2 years to 2020. It's a relief for the scientists, but they are still in a race against time.
In general, developing a satellite takes 5 to 8 years, so an additional 2 years is hardly sufficient time.
Still, the government hopes the extended deadline will help researchers create more key components using homegrown technology and run more checks to boost the rate of success. Related agencies have also been given more time. In particular, the developer of the so-called space internet says the extra couple of years will allow them to conduct thorough testing before mounting the system that will ensure reliable communication between the lunar orbiter and ground control on Earth. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
It's been found that 9 of the top 10 smartphone apps used by Koreans are pre-installed by Google. This is leading to concerns that Google is enjoying a monopoly in the market. Our Lee Joo-young has the story.
A local study conducted in May analyzed the top 10 apps used by people here in Korea. Of the 10, 9 of them are apps that come with the Google Android operating system, save for Korea's ubiquitous messaging app, KakaoTalk. Naver, Korea's largest online portal, ranked 8th in 2013, but failed to crack the top 10 this year. Pre-installed apps appear to have grown in influence. Since domestic phone makers and most manufacturers worldwide, excluding Apple, use the Android OS, it comes as no surprise that Android holds more than 80% of the global market share. Google has recently been hit with 2 fines, one from Russia and one from the EU. Well, Russia's Federal Anti-Monopoly Service fined the company for about $7.4 million in April this year. The other settlement will likely have an impact on Google's earnings. Despite Google arguing that it recuperates the cost of providing the OS for free by bundling the apps with the Google Play Store, it eventually settled and agreed to unbundle the apps until 2023. In June, European Union antitrust regulators slapped Google with a record-breaking $2.7 billion fine, saying the company abused its dominance as a search engine to give unfair advantages to its shopping service. Google's parent firm Alphabet warned investors in its second quarter securities filing that it could face an even bigger fine in 2018 from investigations that are currently underway. In many instances, Google pays manufacturers to pre-install its apps on phones. For one, it pays Samsung based on advertising revenue generated by Samsung devices using Google's apps. Market analysts estimate Google will pay about $3.5 billion to Samsung this year, more than the estimated $3 billion it's expected to pay Apple to remain as its default search engine. With profit margins slimming and the potential for further fines coming from the European Union, Google may be forced to rethink its marketing strategies going forward. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today and this week, but we'll be back next week with more of the day's top business stories, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks so much for watching and have a great weekend.